You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Hello, I'm Kiki Latimer, and I'm your host for the Catholic Bookworm. And we have with us today author Sharon Lebell. I'm very excited because my dear friend of mine, Christine Phoenix Green, recently gave me her little book called Music of Silence, which is very exciting. Can't wait to share ideas about it with you today. So Sharon, before she sort of talks a little bit about herself and lets us know more about her, is in lieu of a prayer, we thought we'd start, because she's a dulcimer player, that we could just bring ourselves into the prayer, a sense of prayerfulness with her music. So Sharon, tell us a little bit about yourself to start off with. You're the author of the book Art of Living, which I haven't read, but it's on my list now. But tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've just always been amazed that we exist. And that amazement has informed what I've done with my professional life, mostly. I write and I speak about a variety of what you might call spiritual topics. I talk about different religions, and mostly, all told, the desire to make our lives meaningful right here and right now, and not to postpone that. So I do these two seemingly disparate things, which is, on the one hand, my language is words. And then on the other side, I'm a performing musician and composer on this kind of a supersized hammer dulcimer. I call it a hammer dulcimer just to keep conversations easy, but it's actually an instrument that was made for me uniquely based on the hammer dulcimer, but I wanted a much wider range and some other things. So so meaning is a key word, as is, I don't know how else to say it, but holiness. Mm-hmm. I've got a thing about holiness. Mm-hmm. No expertise, mind you, but I live the questions that surround the idea of how we might be more accessible to the holy, how we might be instruments ourselves of the holy. I guess I'll leave it at that.
Well, I mean, we certainly, as your book acknowledges, we live in a world where in some ways that's increasingly difficult. For one thing, because of the busyness of the workday, the busyness of family life nowadays. Everybody's busy. And so your book sort of invites us to find ways in which to slow down, or at least take moments during our day to find little moments of space or quiet or contemplation or leisure, which is the basis of culture, I'm told, to find those little moments so that we can move towards holiness. You use the word holiness, which isn't a term, or sanctity, becoming a saint, finding moments of holiness, even that's just not a word that's common in our culture today.
Right.
You wrote the book back in the 1990s, where things are maybe a little slower than they are today, but I think the book is still very relevant. Now, you wrote the book with Brother David, whose last is, you can tell me. What is Brother David's last name?
Steindl-Rast.
Steindl-Rast.
Yes.
So tell me, so Brother David is a monk. He's in a monastery.
Yes. He currently lives in Argentina. He's lived all over the world, and he's lived the life of a Benedictine monk. And many people know Brother David for his insistent message across the decades about the power of gratitude, gratefulness. Now, we hear that word gratitude, we hear the word gratefulness in a lot of wellness spaces these days, for journaling and so forth. But which is all well and good. But Brother David, I urge people to watch videos of some of his talks and to read some of his other books, because he transmits a living sense of what it is to face our moments and all our situations, whether they're congenial or adverse, with the equanimity that is born of gratitude. So anyway, yes, so David and I wrote this book together, and one of the reasons why we decided to do so is our lives, both then when we wrote the book and now, are very different, though they complement one another David's life has been devoted to contemplation, and he's shared the fruits of that with us. And I have, by contrast, lived intensely in and of the world. I raised a family of 6 children. I'm rooted in the awkward and noisy muck of daily life. And though I must say I have had the good fortune of getting to stay for an extended amount of time in a monastery run by beautiful Cistercian nuns, which was a formative experience and helped set the stage for me for what I could contribute to the book. So both David and I have a common aspiration, which is basically to remind ourselves and everyone, pay attention, wake up, be grateful, help, be kind. That the book was written before the explosion of the internet and so many human innovations. I think the book reminds us that we don't live in artifice, where we really are most connected to God, to spirit, when we withdraw from external forces trying to distract us, and then return to them more centered and ready to respond with clarity and an unguarded heart.
I think, often, gratitude comes easily to us when something good comes our way. To have gratitude as a way of life, as just a general all pervasive sort of attitude is the harder thing. When things don't go our way, when things are difficult or painful, to maintain that attitude of gratitude, that life, that it's an all pervasive thing. So that the joy doesn't leave you. Like you mentioned in the book, sometimes we're happy and sometimes we're sad. But that joy and gratitude can remain, even when those things fluctuate.
Right. What you just said put me in mind of perhaps our listening audience will know about the legendary TV producer, Norman Lear. He brought us a lot of situation comedies throughout the 70s, 80s, 90s, and the 2000s. He's a master. And in his personal life, he's now pushing 100 years old. In his personal life, like anybody, he experienced good fortune. He experienced reversals of fortune. He experienced love. He experienced grief. He experienced searing loss and tragedy, the gamut. And I was reading his memoir a few years ago, and I remember that what he says in relation to whatever is happening is, even this I get to experience. Even this I get to experience. And I think that's another way of talking about this posture of gratefulness for just simply having a front row seat to life itself in all of its expressions.
I mean, life, it is amazing. It is amazing, especially when you reach a point where you look back and go, wow, that was awesome. That was horrible, but that was awesome. Well, that was horrible. And you realize
exactly, you're right. It toggles.
roller coaster, relatively intact. And that you're just grateful for the whole ride. Even the parts that were terrifying.
Yes.
I have a sort of saying, I say, give thanks to the fleas. Are you familiar with Corrie ten Boom's story, Bessie ten Boom? So when they were in Auschwitz, they would pray every night in the barracks, the women's barracks. And I believe it was Bessie, I think she's the one who died there. Corrie went on to write the book, The Hiding Place. But Bessie would, they would give thanks for each other and that they had enough food to live. And then Bessie would say, and we give the barracks, their barracks was loaded with fleas and they were bitten. And Bessie would say, and Lord, we give thanks for the fleas. And Corrie would say, no, that's where I draw the line. I will not give thanks for the fleas. But Bessie would. And then later they learned that it was the fleas that kept the guards out of their barracks. And so unlike the other barracks where the women were beaten by the guards wouldn't go into their barracks because of the fleas.
What do you know?
Yeah. I love that story because, every once in a while around here, we're like, give thanks to the fleas, something happening that we can't see the good of it. It just looks like a mess. It just looks like it's just terrible. And just trying to trust that God has some kind of a plan that we can't see, some kind of growth or some kind of, way of, sometimes if I'm stuck at a traffic light and I'll think, it's like, give thanks to the fleas because maybe I'm stuck here is helping me to avoid an accident today. Or to meet somebody I'm supposed to meet, or some interaction, so that continuous trying to give thanks to the fleas, that gratitude, to me, that's always a helpful story.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you for telling us that.
So your book is centered around the monastic hours of the day.
That's right.
I have spent some time at the monastery in Spencer, Massachusetts, the Trappists there. So I'm somewhat familiar with the hours of the day. And my husband and I off and on have read Compline at night. And your book makes me want to get back to Compline. When the grandchildren are here, we always do Compline at night.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Be the officiant, which they think is really cool. So, the little guy, as soon as they can read, they get to be the officiant. That's just great. But I often got up. There they have matins or vigil at, I think it's 3:30 in the morning, and so I would set my alarm for about 3:15, and they have the nave of the church where the monks are, but then they have for that particular vigil, if you're staying there, they have 2 tiny private chapels, and almost nobody ever gets up for vigil. So you can kind of I always bring a big sort of like a big sweatshirt robe with me with a hood, and I can just kind of throw that over my pajamas, throw on my sneakers and run over, and you're not going to see anybody. And then you can just kind of hide in this little dark chapel and listen to the day begin for them. It's so beautiful. And I remember, and it's out in the middle of nowhere in Massachusetts. It's just a beautiful place. And the morning bells ring and the sun isn't up yet. It's still dark when you go over, and you can still see the moon and the stars are out. And then when you come out, the sun is just starting to light up the sky just a little bit. And it's just magnificent, So if I go for 2 or 3 days, I usually at least once or twice try to get up at 3:15, which is a real tough one. But I had
on you.
I had a funny experience. One year I got there, and I think I was just maybe staying for the one night. And I got into bed and I was like, Lord, I can't get up at 3:15. Like, I just can't do it. I'm so tired. No can do, So I had a dream. It must have had it like right around 3:00 in the morning that I woke up and I went outside, and instead of the peace and quiet of the monastery, it was sort of like a circus. And there were tents and there were people yelling and people lined up and, like a carnival. The whole thing was like a big carnival in the front of the monastery. And the monastery was sort of kind of gone. And it was just this mobs of people and noise and people selling stuffed animals and Ferris wheel. This is here, and I was horrified. Like, this is so sad. Like, where's the peace of the beauty and contemplation of the monastery? And then my alarm went off at 3:15, and I woke up from this nightmare.
Oh my goodness.
And I was so grateful that it wasn't true. That I just jumped out of bed, threw my robe on, and ran quiet courtyard to Matins.
Well, that's so vivid. I can really picture.
Gone was any thought that sleep was more important,
Right.
than the availability of this silence and this music of silence that was there. It was, forget sleep. So I try to remember that experience. So your book is centered. Talk to us a little bit about it. It's centered around these hours of the day, the monastic hours.
So, yes, we decided to arrange the book using the canonical hours from vigils through Compline as a kind of trellis to lay out our ideas about being present, really. Because what we wanted to draw attention to is the notion of experiencing time not as a vector going in two directions, segmented into hours or minutes or seconds, but to realize that at any given moment of the day, if you make yourself accessible to the moment, there's a different quality to what is going on, and there's a different quality to time, because one realizes by thinking in terms of these monastic hours that time is in fact cyclical. It's such a comfort to each day come back at the same time of day, not time by a watch, but time kind of the time of the soul. I don't know how else to say it. And to realize that time is as deep as it is wide, that it extends. We use as humans, we use these analogies to try to understand something. And in a way, I feel like I'm not doing time justice by just putting it on a two axes, X and Y. But there's a fullness to time, and this is not esoteric. We've all felt that sense of when we're truly engaged with something that calls to us or that we deeply care about. We all know the expression, I forgot about the time, that it just, the time stopped, all those expressions. And this is what the book, I think, we were trying to give an invitation to our readers not to completely let go of the rope of our conventional understanding of time, because obviously we need to participate in the world, right? But to be able to notice that at any given time of day, I hope this doesn't sound too flaky or strange, but there are messages for us. I know Brother David is a big fan of the idea of angels, messengers, not necessarily winged creatures, but that life kind of speaks to us if we but listen. And by traversing these canonical hours, well, not just by traversing, I beg your pardon, by stopping and honoring and kind of separating out from the rest of the day, this moment. I'm talking to Kiki. This is what we're doing. Time becomes deep. Time becomes infinite, because we get to step into something eternal together.
I mean, we spend a lot of our lives sort of either living, sort of stretching into the past and stretching into the future. You know, we live in those directions, and it is very difficult sometimes to just come into the now, to just be here and be still. It can be, you have to work at it. I don't think it comes naturally. We want to be distracted by the past and the future.
To be sure. And I think there is this kind of fear that if we're not somehow trying to control future outcomes in some way, or tell ourselves kind of stories of the past with lots of confirmation bias, rolled in. There's a kind of fear that, if I were really present, as everyone exhorts us to be, that, we might just go into a kind of free fall or chaos, or, we might get irretrievably lost. Like we sort of use our fixation on past and future as a kind of false sense of moorings in a way. But I think what's so interesting and paradoxical is if one has had the experience of being present, everything is just fine. We're safe, and we're also fully equipped to address the next moment with dignity, grace, and style, because we're not operating from living in a kind of self-protected husk, telling ourselves scary stories.
I mean, we do expend a lot of our energy, like you say, either fixing or regretting or thinking about the past, planning the future, whether it be an hour from now or next week or next year. So that's a lot of energy put out that we lose for the given moment.
Yeah.
The angels throughout the book are beautiful. I guess they're Fra Angelica's angels.
Yes.
They're beautiful. I had heard somewhere, and I often think about it, that in Genesis, when it says, when God created the first day, evening came and morning came. And somewhere along the line, I read that those are the angels, that evening and morning are angels.
That's a beautiful idea.
I wondered if you had ever heard that. That those
I'm
are
not sure I have, but it makes perfect sense, because the morning and the evening are presences.
Right. And they hadn't been, the sun hadn't been created yet. And the day and night wasn't there yet, but evening came and morning came, and evening came and morning comes each time after something's created.
Yes.
And I can't remember who it was that said those are angels. So now I always think of them as the angels.
Well, thank you. I want to keep that in my pocket too.
So the music of silence. I teach a course on silence. At least before the pandemic. Well, I did before the pandemic. I haven't gotten back to it. I'm hoping to teach it again. And I always joke, it's a 6-week course where I talk incessantly about silence. And the importance of silence. And for quite a while, before the pandemic, I was taking a day of silence each week. The book has kind of inspired me to try to find a way to get back to that. For the last 3.5, 4 years, I was taking care of an elderly woman daily. So I had to either be on the phone with her or see her on a daily basis. So that meant that I couldn't do silence for a whole day. She needed me, but she's passed now. And so I don't have that excuse anymore. That day of silence was really beneficial, to just not speak for the day. There was something important, I'd give my husband a note, or he would write me a note. I told him, you can speak, I just can't speak. But he would sort of go into silence as well. So that was kind of nice.
Wow.
So there would be no phone calls, no chatting, no anything. It was really good. It was beautiful. It does help bring you into the now.
Yes.
And so there were so many things in your book that I love you. I know you brought up the line somewhere, T.S. Eliot's line, humankind cannot bear very much reality.
And
that's one of my favorite things that that helps us to sort of understand the now, because it does help. At least for me, that line has always helped bring me into silence. The music. Maybe explain a little bit to our readers this concept of the music of silence.
Yes. I think of silence, in some ways, Kiki, I think I'm restating some things that you've just said much better, but I see silence as being the matrix of life itself. It's what holds all possibility. And it holds the possibility for beauty, for harmony, for steadfastness, for clear seeing. And that all of those qualities are a kind of music themselves. And in some ways, now I'm speaking as a musician, those qualities can, I think, be expressed more directly or eloquently sometimes through, I shouldn't say more than, because poetry is very eloquent as well. But there's something about music that can take us directly to the essence of something, because it takes us to a pre-verbal but no less real place. And then, of course, there's that, just the idea that it is inside, we have to have silence in order to hear the music of the world. Music itself, life itself, is a series of alternations between expressiveness and that quiet matrix of possibility.
Mm. You talk about both with words and with notes that, between each word is silence, between each
Yes.
note is silence. If you think of the whole world, we're just floating in this sea of silence,
Yes.
But I think a lot of people think silence is sort of an empty thing, where it's actually quite thick and full. There's a fullness to silence. When you first get there, it's big and scary and empty, but then you start to realize it's like, a Thomas's English muffin. It's got nooks and crannies. And you think it's just, a flat thing, but it's not.
To me, what you've just said is very, very important. I think you're right. Silence gets mixed up with emptiness, and it couldn't be. It's not.
It's not.
Yeah. I think one thing that silence does is it can refresh in us the idea of doing one thing fully at a time, of caretaking this moment. And entering the moment, if you're reading, entering a text, or if you're in relationship with someone, entering the relationship, not merely staying on the level of the exchange of platitudes. But I don't. This may sound like I'm taking things in a little bit of a different direction, but I do think it's important to say that sometimes there's kind of a prejudice that views the monastic life, which permits us, if we are in it, to have more time in silence. A lot of people might see that as being more spiritual than our regular householder lives. But I think, what's that now?
But it's not, right?
But it's not, because I think each way of life, the life of the monk and the life of the householder, they each involve costs and benefits. And both ways of life have a lot to teach and enrich the other. So those who, to my mind, regard the monastic life as being somehow more ideal for communion with God, I think they're making the mistake of thinking that the idea of spiritual flourishing is a destination, like the monastery, rather than something we carry within us, our kind of our own inner sanctuary, that is with us all the time, that we can visit, and the sanctuaries that we build, however imperfectly, in our connections between ourselves and our loved ones, between ourselves and our communities. So,
I sometimes say changing a diaper or doing the dishes is a great place for prayer and silence.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. That says it perfectly, because I think there is this misnotion that we have to set ourselves up for spiritual or contemplative success by, but what I'm, just for shorthand, calling the householder, that person has the opportunity to see and to conjure the sacred, while being deeply mired in the muck of the mundane, the changing the diapers, you say, being fully engaged with this imperfect, often harsh, often unrelenting, often disappointing world. And so, there we are standing in the grocery line with two implacable children crying, and we see the stares of disapproving onlookers. But I think that's where the sacred and the holy live. I think that's the opportunity for holiness. I think that's where we're tested, in those kind of spaces, and where we get to, when we're changing that diaper, we get to exert ourselves in love and in patience and in temperance and in being vessels for the good and for the kind and for the possible.
In my course that I teach on silence, I bring in small copies of Grunwald's painting, The Temptation of St. Anthony. Are you familiar with that?
No, tell me.
Really grotesque, horrible painting of St. Anthony. He's being attacked by monsters and demons and naked women, and just all kinds of horrible creatures are attacking him. And he is kind of thrown back in the painting like this, and he's laughing. And
Yes.
I tell my students, I turn the page over and you have just the white on the back. And I say, most of you think this is a picture of silence, like an empty, blank, white page. Then I turn and I said, but this is the real picture of silence. That here you have St. Anthony being attacked by everything, and nothing's going right in this painting, except the fact that he is laughing. He is coming against all of it by this holy, peaceful, grounded laughter. And it's an amazing painting. Because I said, like when you first go into silence, I tell my group, first silence is loud, like you hear yourself and your own thoughts. And then eventually you start to have these contemplative, quiet moments of peacefulness. And you think, now I've found silence. But I say that's not the goal of silence. The goal of silence is after that is to go back out into the world, into the family on Thanksgiving when everybody's there, and to still have that silence in here so that you could just go and do the dishes or change the diaper or whatever, and find you have that landscape within you. That silent now is accessible to you in the midst of the demons and the monsters and the naked St. Anthony, and just roll back and laugh and be at peace with all of it. He doesn't. You don't see him trying to change it. He's not hitting or punching out at any of it. He's just, oh well, here it is, And this elderly woman that I took care of for the last 4 years, she had gone blind, and she had a lot of mental illness to begin with, and she was a real character, very eccentric person. And one of my last outings with her was to her eye doctor. And it was a hot July day, and she had trouble walking. And when she got into this big office where there were quite a number of people, she proceeded to start to yell and scream and swear. And then we had to wait because the doctor was busy. And the more we waited, the angrier she got. And the more she had a really loud voice. Every name in the book was coming out of her. And I just okay, here we are. We got her in and we got her out. It was like an hour and a half ordeal. And we got into the car, finally back to the car. And she just looked at me quietly and she went, I was bad, wasn't I? And I went, yep. You mad at me? And I went, no. And she said, you're not mad? And I went, no. I said, I think we need to go to McDonald's and get a mango smoothie for each of us. which is what we did. And we drove home with our mango smoothies, and I realized that these 4 years of taking care of her, which were really crazy, and she was so difficult, and miserable and unhappy, and mental illness and anxiety and depression, had changed me into a different person. That I had found this now of silence, like deep, deep down, so that I wasn't angry. It's like, wow, this is like really nuts. This visit to this doctor. And, I had people like looking like, oh my gosh, like, how do we get them out of here? If I had to do that earlier, forget it. It would never, I would have been angry, and I wouldn't have been able to find that silent place. But instead, I just went to that now of like, this is amazing. This is amazing. This is an experience I'll probably hopefully never have again, but here it is. And I thought about that as I read the book, that we all have those kind of moments, and how do we access the grace, your book, the grace to deal with things gracefully, and your book gives us little hour by hour means to do that, which is really a beautiful thing. Yeah.
I'm glad you think so. We wanted it to be simple, not simplistic, but simple and accessible.
I think it really is. I think it's needed now more than ever. One of the questions you asked is the book still relevant? It was written in the 1990s when life was a little easier and more simple, and pretty much pre-internet life.
Right.
But I think it's probably even more relevant now. And there are things on the internet available to us now that can, bring the music, the chants that you mentioned, can bring the hours of the day to us. I have an app on my Laudate, which has all of the, the hours of the day and right on it. So so even though the technology has all of its faults, it also has all the good stuff.
Oh, to be sure. Yeah. To be sure. Yes. That's lovely.
How did you meet Brother David?
I honestly don't remember, say, the moment or proximate circumstance where we were introduced, but he was, I think he was just friends of some friends of mine. Yeah. Yeah. It might have been at perhaps like a multicultural religion conference, something like that. I used to frequent those kind of things back in the day. Yeah.
So are you working on anything now at the moment? What's coming? What's up next? I wish I had living, but maybe we'll do another interview at some point.
I'd love that. I'm really enjoying speaking with you, Kiki. I'm doing a lot of things now. The newest thing, and it's interesting, speaking of technology, which is, it's very easy to see its faults and its dangers and its shortfalls. But I've been doing something experimental with two other co-founders. We started an online, non-sectarian, international group of open to anybody who want to discuss the big questions in life. And it's called The Walled Garden, thewalledgarden.com. And it's everyone's welcome. We have all kinds of people who come and teach online, and I do presentations. I guess you call them meetups. I'm not that facile with the nomenclature of the internet. But what we wanted to do, it started, as so many things have, during COVID, when we were also isolated from one another. And we wanted to create a forum where people could talk about loneliness, or they could, it's not therapeutic. That's not the purpose of it. It's just for anyone who is trying to live a life of virtue, trying to, kind of liberate the best part of themselves. I suppose you'd just say that its main spirit is humanistic, but we've had people from all religions, people from we have scientists, we have all kinds of people. So anyway, thewalledgarden.com.
I will definitely
come see us.
I will.
Yeah.
I will. And I assume your books are available on Amazon.
Oh yes, and in bookstores.
A silence book that I've fallen in love with, and highly recommend it. Everybody in my family will get one for Christmas, so or sooner, because I'm just excited to share it with a number of people. It's really beautiful, and I thank you and please, send my love to Brother David and my gratitude.
Will do. Of course. One last thing I thought I would mention is the book I'm actually most known for, which has also been around for quite a few decades. It's called The Art of Living. And it's meant to be a modern, accessible summary of the teachings of the spiritual teachings of the Stoic philosopher Epictetus, who actually taught Marcus Aurelius and The Art of Living.
Well, that's on the list.
Yeah.
So we'll end with the music of music, your dulcimer.
106 strings, all wanting to go out of tune. this is this one part. It should go.
Thank you. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Oh,
And
thank you
so much. This is wonderful. And I will get the other book as soon as possible. But again, give my love to Brother David. And
Will do. It's really been pleasure and privilege to speak with you. I hope this will be a preview of coming attractions, because
I hope so too.
yeah.
I really
Yeah.
hope so. I'm going to check
Very
out the
special.
Wall Garden, allputtogether.com.
Yes.
I will look for it. Thank you so much, Sharon.
Thank you, my new friend. Bye for now. Love always.
Or you get depressed in Connecticut, let's meet for coffee or wine or something.
Love it. I would just love that. I mean that sincerely. Yes.
Me too. Me too. Take care.
Okay, Kiki. So long.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
Thank you for listening to a production of WCAT Radio. Please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.